Well, when I went in and started talking to my fellow commanders, well, the fellows who were commanders, I was retired by this time, and I said, let me talk to you about the fully burdened cost of fuel, what it's costing you to get there. Yeah, we don't want to hear that stuff. Our soldiers need everything, and they need it right now. I said, oh, I'm not talking about dollars. What's the fully burdened cost in blood? What is it costing you in troops and combat power to guard that? And we've had a little bit of experience going back to the Red Ball Express in World War II. You know, what held up Patton? Yeah, so we've seen this before. So what this led me to is really thinking about this problem and realizing that our dependence on oil really has three manifestations. There's a national security issue, which is what I study. There's an economic issue, and there's an environmental issue. And we have to think about all of those things. You can't just focus in on one thing or the other. I had the pleasure of being at a dinner at Tom Friedman's house, and there was the CEO of Google and the CEO of Conservation International and former secretaries of the Interior and Economy and all kinds of other highfalutin folks, and me, just because they needed. They figure if they wrote something up, they gave it to me and I read it, I understood it, then they could give it to the rest of the public. But the fact is you have all these different people sitting there, and it was interesting because the guys from the conservation group said, you know, we've been talking about this stuff for years, but nobody took it seriously until you national security guys started talking about it. And so that's really what's changed our view of this. And if you look at what we've done, we fought wars for oil. World War II was really a war about oil. Not for us, but it certainly was for the Japanese. The co-prosperity sphere that they wanted to create in Southeast Asia was about access to resource, primarily among those is access to oil. When we attacked the Germans, what did we attack? We attacked the oil fields in Romania.
Right.
The
Lesti. That's it.
Gentlemen, any personal experience there? The largest daylight bombing raid ever.
Yes.
We didn't do that stuff, but that's how critical it was. And oh, by the way, it caused the Germans to go and develop a way to turn coal into oil. Yeah. Fischer-Tropsch. Those were two fine German gentlemen that figured out how to do that. By the way, we're still looking at those processes today. Again, we've had a number of fights that have been about this particular thing. I said that World War II was won because we floated to victory on a sea of oil. So we started there. It's also about, let's face it, support of terrorism. You know, for the first time since arguably the Civil War, we're funding both sides of a fight.
Thank you. We
send, I wish I drew a more economic card, but we send $1 billion a day, we as America, $1 billion a day overseas to purchase that oil. Now where does that money go? It goes to Saudi Arabia. It goes to various countries who may not have our best interest at heart. But it also fuels a worldwide addiction. It's not good enough for us to get off foreign oil. We have to have an alternative to oil. Right now, when you go to the pumps, you get your choice. 1, 2, 3 different spigots here, right? Yeah. Oil, oil, oil. And you mostly are going to put your money towards the fine products of, oh, I don't know, Venezuela. That's right. Wouldn't it be nicer if you had the opportunity to maybe pump some ethanol or maybe pump some methanol? Now, I understand that both of those products, although they could be produced in Iowa, preferably not from food stocks, that can be done now too. Now, they're about half as energy dense as gasoline, so you only get half the mileage. But who's my patent holders here? How come we can't come up with something that would increase our mileage by 50%, making it a wash?
We just had to speak and talk about it.
There you go. I mean, we've got to think about those things. And we've got to think about both of our energy uses. We use infrastructure energy, lights, air conditioning, that sort of stuff in our buildings. And then we have mobility. The oil challenge is really on the mobility and the transportation side. And that's where we've got to find the alternatives. And we've got to find ways to do it that make sense. Now, we now know really what the real value of oil is. 900 million is worth 270 lives. $900 million is the value of the oil leases BP got off the shores of Libya in return for the release of al-Megrahi. That's 270 lives. That's about $3.3 million a life. That is criminal.
Yes.
And that is something that we as a nation need to do something about. But right now, it's kind of disingenuous because we're kind of like junkies that are upset that our pusher has done a bad thing. I mean, until we, as Americans, and I'm speaking to a group that understands sacrifice and giving themselves, we as a large group realize that we may have to give of ourselves for some time to be able to break that addiction. It's something we're going to face. And so those are all really the national security implications of this. Oh, one final thing. When the price of a barrel of oil goes up by $10, remember how it went, 44 to 130 and the back down? Well, when it goes up $10, it costs the Department of Defense $1.3 billion. That's $1.3 billion that was not planned for. That's $1.3 billion that they have to come back to the Congress and ask for, or take it out of something else, like better body armor, like better housing for soldiers, their families, and that sort of thing. These are the sort of things that we're tied to because we have no choice. Oil is the only strategic commodity left. You don't have a choice. There was a time when there was another strategic commodity that there was no substitute for. It was salt. Salt, of all things. Remember when the Romans used to talk about a soldier being worth his salt? That's because he literally was worth his salt. Because salt was the only proven preservative for food. But when suddenly we came in with other things, suddenly salt, which is something I can have on my table right now. Oil for transportation is that only strategic commodity. We have no choice. Now there's lots of folks trying to figure out other stuff, and I'm working with groups every day. They're looking at being able to take algae, that stuff we try to keep from growing in our swimming pools, and turning it into fuel. And it is not far off. It's expensive right now, but there are ways to make it less expensive. So if you think about what are those other economic implications of oil besides the $1 billion we send out every day?
It's the carbon units you put in the air.
I'm going to get to the environment, but thanks for reading ahead. How about, let's see, $35 billion that you and you and you and you and you, well, you're all taxpayers here, I assume, are paying the oil companies in subsidies and tax relief.
That's right.
To do things like, oh, I don't know, go prospecting for deep water wells. There's a bill in Congress that would take a lot of these off the book right now to tune about $20 billion. And the oil companies go, oh, gosh, we don't get that $20 billion break. It's just not economic for us to work here. It's all going to go overseas. Oh, what would my first sergeant have said? Well, something I wouldn't say in here. But I disagree. I disagree with that. And I'll tell you why. Because in the first quarter of this fiscal year, the oil companies made $20 billion in profit. That's like, you got gross, and then you got here's my expenses, and then this stuff up here. All of these things that you hear from the big oil companies, that they're going to, it's going to drive jobs and all that stuff, ain't necessarily so. But they do really want to go out there and they want to drill 1 mile down. You know why? Because they can. Well, obviously not very well. And so we have an opportunity now to think about those economic aspects of what we're looking at. Oh, by the way,